My name is Branden Geringer. I'm 36 years old, father of two boys. Been married for going on 10 years. And my story starts off in a small town in northeastern Oregon. I grew up with really young parents. My mother was 18 years old. My dad was only 21. So my family, didn't have like a faith background or any religion, and I really didn't have a concept of God until I was about 8 years old. In that time, I definitely saw things and were exposed to um, things that I didn't really know how to handle. For me, my first exposure to pornography was when I was only 5 years old. I came across it while looking through my uncle's army bag. He always kept really cool things in there, like bullets to M16s and different things like that. And so I loved looking through that stuff until one day I came across a magazine that was a Playboy, and I really didn't know what it was I was looking at. I definitely knew it wasn't something I should have been looking at. I remember having to hide it in case, my grandparents or someone, were to come to the room. I knew I'd probably get in trouble. At the same time, I had this sense that this was something that older men just kind of do, because I did remember at least one earlier memory of seeing my dad and one of his friends looking at similar magazines, and so I figured it was just something that maybe older guys did, and but really didn't have a lot of context as a 5-year-old. And so that happened maybe a couple times, and but that was my first exposure. And now that I'm older, looking back, just I would say that has been part of my journey, is being able to process kind of what that is, and now having kids, that are that age, and boys, just kind of what that potentially did to wire my brain in certain ways. But as I got older, and like I said, when I was around 8 years old, that is when Jesus and any religion or faith came into my family, and it came through my dad. My dad was really instrumental in bringing me to Christ. I didn't really have much of a relationship with him. He was pretty distant, kept to himself. He had hobbies, which were, working on his truck and being out with his friends. So he wasn't very, around very often, and I didn't feel like he really sought me out very much. I was kind of left alone to take care of myself and find ways to entertain myself. So, but when Jesus entered the picture and he came to Christ, that all changed. I just remember him being, for the first time, very attentive to me and moving towards me, wanting me to know what this was that he was learning. And at first, if I'm honest, even as an 8-year-old, it seemed kind of weird. The only reference I had to religion was maybe Ned Flanders from the Simpsons. And so I just figured, oh no, we're going to turn into maybe a weird family. And even pushed back when he wanted to start praying at the dinner table. But that quickly all went away when I saw how my dad's heart changed, and how it made him a kinder man, and someone who was interested in me and moved towards me. And so it was only a few weeks after that, as he was explaining, what the gospel means and sin, even as an 8-year-old, I knew what he meant by as a person, I was doing things that that I felt guilty about, and whether that was, cussing with my cousins and practicing bad words, or being selfish, different things like that. And so I gave my heart to Christ, and that changed my life forever. And so fast forwarding now into when I was around 12 years old, at this time my family started going to church regularly. I wanted to learn as much as I could about the Bible and God, and probably did more than most kids to be involved in youth groups and learn as much as I could from my parents. I was always listening to their conversations. But around the age of 12, that's when I discovered masturbation, and that was for me opened up a whole new just area of, I would say, just difficulties in my life, and this whole new struggle. I knew what the Bible said about lust, and that the sin behind that, but for me it was just overwhelmingly, the desire was overwhelming, and I felt like I tried talking to my dad one time about it. It seemed like he didn't have much information to give, other than what scripture was. I remember him giving me a book to read that was supposed to be on it, talked about things of, balancing your eyes and different things like that, but it never seemed to really help. And so now, as a 12-year-old who loved Jesus, that was when the battle of sexual desire and all of that really started to ramp up and take off. And I just remember living in a life of fantasy. Even before that, I spent a lot of my time kind of living in other worlds of fiction. And then when this took over, it was a whole new world to live in. And that just kind of continued through high school and even into college. I always wanted to know or find someone who was going through what I went through. I definitely felt sometimes that I was alone. I did have some friends I was able to confide in, some other Christians, guys that were my age, and we would try to keep each other accountable, but usually just kind of ended up being, hey, did you look at porn? Yeah, me too. Okay, we'll try better next time. Didn't really know where to go from there. But yeah, I just remember always, searching the church, and, even once I got into college, I moved to a bigger city, went to a bigger church, and it just seemed like there weren't any resources for someone like me. I finally found one group that at least gave me the opportunity to be open and share. This was, I was probably in my early 20s. By this time, I was married to my first wife, and we had already been going through a really rough time. I had been open about my struggle with pornography with her, but in a way where I would continue to mess up and confess. And that pattern really did a lot to destroy our relationship and our marriage. So at this point, this group was an attempt to try to do some repair. It was very short, it was only a couple weeks. And even within that group, as I saw other men boldly sharing, I feel like I couldn't be fully honest still. And that if I was to share some things, I was going to be met with judgment or maybe contempt. And so it didn't really do much to heal any of that. It continued, and unfortunately that marriage did end, and only lasted 4 years before we were separated and divorced. And then it was shortly after that, though, that I met my current wife. And this was the first time in my life, as we started dating, I could tell that there were things that I was doing that I didn't have any control over. As much as I wanted to move on from my previous marriage and that relationship and be fully present and involved in this new relationship, there were things that she would do that would, I come to find out, would trigger me to where I was right back into the past of how my ex-wife had done things, to me. And so that was the first time that I actually decided to seek counseling, started to work with someone through these different issues, and it helped. I was really surprised at how much it helped. Counseling had never been something I was suggested before, and I kind of just took a chance on and was really surprised at how much it helped. And so then fast forward, a couple more years, we're 3-4 years into the marriage. This time I chose to not share my addiction to pornography, which ended up coming out after a year or so. Obviously, a lot of hurt feelings. She was devastated by it, and the counseling didn't seem to do much. And it wasn't until I was going to a church in Boise, Idaho, that they announced that there was going to be a specific group starting at the church that had to do with sexual sin and pornography addiction. And I knew that this was something that I probably should go to. I didn't heavily pursue it right away. I don't think I was quite ready, or I was telling myself. I just knew that if I joined the group, one, I would have to expose some things that I hadn't shared yet, so there was some shame there. And I was going to have to make some changes and be serious about it. But it was actually the Lord that told me. It was one evening where I was I wasn't even thinking about the group, and it had been a couple months, and I felt like he kind of took over my thoughts, and there was this voice that was like, I want you to sign up for this group. And I told the voice I don't want to. But obviously it was patient and kind, and it was just like, no, I want you to at least sign up for this group. And so I did. I was like, okay, I'll at least take the first step. I'll just sign up and see what happens. Sure enough, a couple weeks go by, I hadn't thought about it, and then I get the email that the group's going to be starting soon. And so, of course, I had to tell my wife and everything. And right away, though, I could tell by joining this, and this was a 423 communities group. The first week, I could tell that this was something different than that I had never experienced before. The openness, the honesty from the leadership and the others, I knew that this was a place that I could share things that I'd never shared with anyone before, and I would be met with grace and compassion, and the ability to actually start working through things and start to learn more about myself and the reasons behind. I just remember the first chapter of the first book, already opened my mind to concepts I'd never thought of before about how to, about how my drive towards pornography and masturbation was really more of a way that I was medicating from deeper issues and problems. And for me, a lot of those were just emotional pain that I was dealing with on, maybe a daily basis, or and so just right away, one of the first techniques was just to stop and think about, like, if I felt any pull toward wanting to pursue, looking at pornography, just to stop and ask myself why, and start to assess, how I was feeling, what was going on, And I could always, as I would take time to think about it, I could always bring it back to um, a difficult, maybe negative emotion. I was dealing with anxiety, stress. I was afraid that, I wasn't going to hit my quota for work that month, and how would I pay the bills? And so there was always something I could take it back to. And then as I started to learn how to take those things to the Lord and in prayer and work through those things and trust in Him and His provision, the desires died down, and a lot of that started to go away. And so it's been over 3 years now that I've been a part of 423, and I currently help lead in groups, and I continue to find more and more things about myself, things from my past that I'm still learning to unearth and heal from, and at least now how to have compassion and give myself grace when things get tough. And I would say now the most recent thing is walk in complete honesty, especially with my spouse. There's always been part of me that really wants to hide and stay hidden and not quite reveal everything. And so that's what I feel like God is really working on me now. And so I just see more and more ways that He is working to sanctify me and make me more like Jesus. And I can say for the last 3 years, I've been able to walk in a freedom that I've never had before. I didn't have for decades. And that just gives so much hope that then I can go and share with others. And I'm so excited to share with others. And I think what's one of the coolest things is I just know what it's like to be a part of a church and always looking for someone to help. And now I feel like God is creating me and changing me into a person that I get to be that for other people. So it's a huge blessing, and gives me immense joy and sense of purpose. So that's my story.